Welcome to another vintage fishing reel service video. In this episode we have a Zebco Omega 154 underspin. So this one sits under the reel under the rod like a spinning reel. This particular one, I don't know what I paid for. I usually end up not paying more than $5, so I'd be shocked if I paid more than $5 for this. In fact, I think I remember now where I got this, and that was about $5 at a flea market. But this one's working fairly good. I mean, everything's functioning that I can see. But it's farm fresh and crusty, and well, among other things, the cap's on wrong. That drain hole should be down here. But at any rate, you always want to go through a reel when you first get it and service it regardless of how it's functioning. And of course, if there's any old line in there, you want to get that out of there. But this is a nice quality underspin reel, and they were available between 1983 and 1988. They were considered a medium freshwater fishing reel. They had a gear ratio, or have a gear ratio of 3.5 to 1, weights to about 10 ounces, and they were pre-spooled with 100 yards of 10-pound test. I've serviced one of these before. Do I remember anything about what's inside it? Nope. In fact, most of the reels that I do on these videos I am doing for the very first time, because I don't do this to make money. I've never made a dime on doing these videos. I'm just servicing my own reels. I don't service other people's reels unless it's for a friend or something like that. And I throw them on video just maybe because they might help somebody else out that has an old reel that they want to go through and want to see inside before they get in there. Do I make mistakes sometimes? Yep. Do what I do at your own risk. So let's go ahead and get started and see what we can find here. Okay, so the cover just is a short counterclockwise turn. Looks like a typical Zebco spinner head where you hold the handle and then counterclockwise spin on the spinner head. We can look to see if there are any cuts where the line rides against the spinner head there at the pickup pin, and there's not. That's a good thing. This line break seems to be in really good shape. It's not brittle, so that's good. That could go in the parts tray. And then we have a E-clip here to get the spool off, and before we start monkeying around with the spool, I like to make sure that my drag is all the way off. Especially relevant if the drag works by little fingers inside the hole in the spool there, because that make it really tight to get off. It isn't always, but even on the other types, when you take off the spool, it's just generally a good idea to have that drag turned off. So there's the E-clip, and then there's a metal drag washer that's keyed, and then you've got a Teflon drag washer that goes against that side of the spool, and then off comes the spool. And we've got another Teflon washer there. And I guess no other washer. I'd have to probably check and look at it schematic, but sometimes there's another metal washer here, and when you're dealing with an old reel that somebody's probably monkeyed with, you never know if everything's there or not. But in this particular specimen, they've got the Teflon drag washer going right up against the pressure plate here. The pressure plate can simply lift out, and this tab here is going to end up going into bigger tab. So the bigger tab, there's two tabs on here. There's a big one and a little one. The little one is just to set the thing, to keep it from spinning around, and the little tab goes into that hole there. The big tab goes into the drag screw, the drag adjustment screw, which is right there. So when we reassemble this, we have to make sure that that slot in the drag adjustment screw is parallel with the large tab here, because that's basically how you push this pressure plate up against the spool and create your drag. All right. Like I said, I have no recollection of what I did the first time I took one of these apart, but among other things, I want to get that old line off of there. There. Now, in terms of getting inside here, I see screws here. That would be my guess for removing the rear cover, but I don't know what this is here. It looks like it's for a coin. Maybe it's just an access panel or something. No, I don't remember. Maybe it's just an access panel for checking in there and maybe adding lubricant or something, but certainly not what you need to worry about in terms of taking the thing apart. So we'll go ahead and remove these screws next. And then the rear housing comes off. That can go on the parts tray. I don't recall a method of getting that off of there, and I don't think you can just punch out this pin. Let's just proceed removing the main gear here. Let's see here. I guess we can take the handle off here by unscrewing this cap and then pulling that out. And then popping out these little plastic bushings. And then you want to be real careful with this anti-reverse mechanism here, because you've got spring and stuff in there, and all of this is fused together. So this gear is part of this piece here. So you can take that apart, and I probably will at the sink, but you want to be real careful to get that back the way you found it. So you've got this washer here, and then you've got this part here, and that spring goes like that. It kind of looks like it kind of clips over that portion of that shaft there, that wide portion of the shaft, and then your spring goes on over top of, or your washer goes on over top of that. So that can go in the parts tray. And so now, can this be winkled out of there? I mean, you could end up taking off the spring and pushing it out the other way. And because this is, I think, maybe that does, because this pin is constrained by the housing when you put the housing back on. So it might be designed to pop out of there. Because when the housing's in place, the pin can't come out because it's bound on either side. So let's just see if this thing will move. There it comes. No, yes. And there comes the anti-reverse pull. So let me get something a little narrower to pop that pin the rest of the way out. There it is. And then this anti-reverse, I'll show you where that goes when we reassemble. Alright, so now we should be able to get this thing out of the way and pull out our pinion gear and axle shaft. And we can get this the rest of the way out. Okay, so there's a little clip here that if you wanted, you could remove. That just holds this, I think this is the anti-reverse pawl in place. I don't think I need to end up taking and monkeying around taking that off, so I'm not going to. It looks like there is a bearing in there. I don't know if I can sneak that out of there or not. Yeah. So there's the bearing, and I don't know if it matters which way that goes in there, but that was the side facing up towards the pinion gear. And then we should go ahead and take out the drag adjustment knob and get that all cleaned up. And I'm guessing, yes, let's see, this is counterclockwise to remove. So it's bass backwards. It's reverse threaded. And then that should allow our drag adjustment knob to come out. You can see it's pretty corroded. We'll take some steel wool to that. But that is all there is to disassembly of the Zebco Omega 154. So we've got all those parts in our tray, and I'll be off to the sink where these will be in some cases doused with WD-40 to get off old greases and that kind of thing, and ultimately will be scrubbed with Dawn dishwashing soap and a toothbrush, and make sure get cotton swabs down in all the little holes and journals and things, and thoroughly cleaned. I spend more time at the sink cleaning parts than I ever do here at the desk, at the workbench. So I don't show that anymore. I showed it on one of the early episodes just to give you an idea what it's all about, but nobody wants to sit and watch me clean at the sink for an hour or a half hour or whatever it takes. So I'll get these cleaned up and we'll be back just like that. Okay, let's get all our parts spread out here so you can kind of see what all we got. And we'll start reassembling with the probably, well, I need to go clean out that bearing. I forgot to do that, so I'll be right back. Okay, so I'm going to just take a little bit of grease and put it around that bearing there, and then I'm going to slip that back into place just like that. Okay. I think we can go ahead and grease the teeth on this high quality brass pinion gear. Generally in Zebcos, if you see the word Omega, that means it's one of the higher end reels. We're going to go ahead and oil the axle shaft here. And of course, I always try, I could oil up here and then just work it back and forth, but I always try to get a little oil up underneath there and then work it that way. And put that back into place. And then we can start on our main gear and grease the teeth. Just kind of pack that reel grease. It's good to use grease and oils specifically made for fishing reels, although I do use mainly out of convenience, but it's a high quality. You're not going to get much better than clock oil for oil, but there are oils specifically made for fishing reels that are probably basically the same thing. And then we have to get this spring back on there, and it has to kind of fit over that wide part of the shaft there. It's not wanting to stick. There it sticks. But speaking of sticking, I'm gonna grease the anti-reverse cogs, because that might quiet that down a little bit. I'm going to put a little oil inside here where the crankshaft goes. And then I'm going to get this back on there and sprung out. And then we've got a washer that goes over the top of that. And then that, well, we got to get our anti-reverse pawl back in there. And I'm trying to figure out which way that goes. Does the long end face towards the top of the reel or the other way? I guess we'll find out. Because I lost that before I was paying attention. I think it's kind of hard to test it without the bushings in there, but I think this long end of that anti-reverse pawl faces what would be the reels underneath, basically up towards the finger button there. That's the way it's going in here. I think that's the way it goes in, but if it isn't, if it ain't, well, we'll find out soon and flip it around. Alright, so we can slide. See the way that's going in? This faces down. And that, I think, is what engages this little mechanism here that allows you to turn your anti-reverse on and off. Might need to slip underneath there. Ah, this confounded thing. I think that one arm, this arm here, this bottom arm, needs to slip kind of in that hole underneath this arm on that anti-reverse. So I think it needs to go down in there. Okay. Now we're going to find out whether I've got this reassembled right here pretty quick once I get these bushings in. So I'm going to oil the inside of these because that's supposed to be a really smooth and freely moving part. There are little tabs or ears on the outside of this that line up with little notches on the inside there, and that'll, if they're in there right, that'll clip. Whoops, I'm not gonna go in there if it ain't over the axle or the shaft. You gotta get that shaft lined up. Something's hindering. I wonder if I got that anti-reverse in wrong. And this is not going down far. It's either in wrong or it's out of place. Let's try it with the long end facing the other way. It's kind of a cantankerous mechanism. I'm going to slip that bushing in all the way down and then oil this one and line up the tabs and line that. Okay, push that one all the way down. Now let's check our anti-reverse. Okay, so it may be that the anti-reverse will only go in one way that'll allow you to drop that main shaft down, but basically the long end of that pawl faces the opposite direction of the of where your finger lever is. Okay, so essentially the bottom of the reel when it's being used in the right orientation. So that is together and working properly. So let's go ahead and put on the handle. I think it's okay to do that at this point. Now we need to get this mechanism back in there. And get the pin. I'm just going to put a little oil on that pin just to make sure, just kind of as an anti-corrosion mechanism. Oh, come on. There. Now line that up. We get that flush in there so that now, yes, also that oil that I put on that pin helps with the pivot. And then I'm going to put a little down in here where that scrapes against the housing, lubricate that up good. And then we can put, if we want to avoid some wear here, we can put a little grease on the end of the axle shaft and on the button and so on there. So that takes care of that. Now, I don't know how much improvement the steel wool is going to have, but we've got a little bit of corrosion on this drag adjustment wheel here. Just get that off the best that I can, and then maybe just dip my fingers in some grease here and just give it a coating, sort of an anti-corrosion coating. Maybe if I put it in upside down, I can get that nasty corrosion facing away. But we'll get this in here now. To tighten, we have to go against our instincts because this is reverse threaded. So we're going counterclockwise to tighten that down. And we want to go all the way down with it so that when we reassemble the spool and stuff, there's no pressure on the pressure plate. Okay. We could have put a little oil. I'm going to just lubricate that a little bit and back that out and just get some oil on those threads. Should have done that. Should have oiled the threads before I put the screw back in. But that'll be all right. Kind of got to hold that wheel while you're turning that. All right. Now we're ready for the pressure plate. Where is it? There it is. And remember that the long big tab goes into the screw head of the drag adjustment. And you're going to want to make sure that that's parallel so that it slips in there. If we're worried about it, sometimes this is your drag clicker. That can get a little sprung, so you can bend that up just a tad. Make sure you have a good clicking sound. That's fitting on there kind of tight. I wonder if that Lexan is, maybe just a little lubrication will help, but sometimes this Lexan swells. And you don't need extra drag with, you got plenty of drag on the drag mechanism. You don't need undue drag from the spindle. So on with our Teflon drag washer. And then I'm going to go ahead and grease the inside of the spool here. And while I'm into the grease, I'm going to grease this here to avoid wear on the pickup pin mechanism. Put that back into place. I wish that was on there. If I were really concerned about it, I might. Sometimes I'll just take a Dremel tool with one of the barrel sanders and just take a little bit off of the inside of the spool rather than try to sand the spindle, and that'll loosen that up a little bit, but it's not terrible. Yeah, it's freeing up now. I've got some grease on there, but sometimes that Lexan swells, and hard time even getting the spool off. But when the drag is at 0, we don't want too much drag on from the spindle. But at any rate, now we're ready for our second Teflon washer, our keyed metal washer, which is going to fit down into one of those little grooves. Nope, dummy, before I do that, I gotta get the rear housing back on, dummy. Gotta put these rear housing screws back in. And you need to do that before you put the pressure plate on, because there's a screw hole underneath there. Pressure plate in the slot. Teflon washer, spool, Teflon washer, metal washer, E-clip. And again, this E-clip goes on as easy as it will when the drag is turned completely off. If you have pressure from the drag pushing up on that, then you can have a hard time even getting this in the slot. Okay, now we need to lubricate our pickup pin just around the pivot point where it rides against the metal. Work that in, and then a clockwise spin. Yeah, get on there. You don't need to overly tighten it, just snug. And now we're ready for now this thing here, here's the deal. Just because something says stainless doesn't mean that it can't or won't rust. Basically, there's a coating on stainless steel that if it gets nicked or certain chemicals are applied, you can get rust. The question is, what is rusting here? Is it this gold coating, or is it coming up from underneath into the metal? Something is rusting. Now here you had a piece where there was some rust, and I went at it with some steel wool, and what you can see is that it's tore into this gold coating, or whatever this gold coating is, and that'll start peeling off. So I'll probably put a little super glue around that to keep that from further peeling. But you have to be careful in terms of how you deal, if you want to try to pretty this thing up, of how you deal with these rust spots. I'm inclined, and again, I'm not sure if it's rust coming up from underneath the gold, or if it's the gold plating that's creating the rust, or what, but I'm inclined to just, look pretty, but just leave that go. Now, when this goes on, because this is an underspin, that's the bottom of the reel where the water's going to drain out. So you want this drain hole to be down. So you're going to find your tabs and turn that clockwise, and your drain hole's down there. Your logo will be off to either side instead of underneath the trigger. So, where's my cloth? There it is. So we'll wipe the old gal down. And eventually get some 10-pound test on there, 100 yards. And of course, for me, I'm going to want this handle on the other side. Somebody had it on this way, but I think, yeah, I'm pretty sure I'm going to want the handle on that side, just the way I would have the handle position for a spinning outfit. So like that. But there you have, all cleaned up and ready to go fishing again. The Zebco Omega 154, available between 1983 and 1988, and still a fine reel to take out fishing. And that's what I'm going to do with this eventually. Hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching.